Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Dimitra's Dishes. I'm so excited to share this recipe with you today. I'm going to teach you how to make my apple spice cake. Now I'm going to show you how you can use the same recipe, same ingredients, but make an apple spice cake with it or an apple spice loaf. You choose. So the difference is basically in how much apples or how many apples go into the cake or the batter. So the batter is all the same. It's filled with all the flavors of fall like cinnamon and cloves and apples and just all of those comforting, delicious flavors that'll make your house smell great and that taste wonderful too. The loaf is more like a brunch type recipe. It's more similar to like a banana nut bread. It has tons of apples inside of the batter. And then the spice cake, the apple spice cake, is not gonna have any apples in it, but it's gonna have apples on top of it, almost like a tart, but with a cake bottom. So we're gonna get straight to making the cake today. Let's start. So the first thing we're gonna do is butter the loaves. I have 2 loaf pans and I just have some soft butter, and with my fingers I'm just gonna rub the butter all around the pans, and then I'm going to layer a piece of parchment paper inside of the pan so that way the cake is very easy to take out later on. If you prefer to use nonstick spray, you can go ahead and spray the loaf pans too, that'll work. Place the loaf pans on a baking sheet and set it aside because now we're gonna go ahead and combine the wet ingredients. So in a large bowl, I'm gonna combine my olive oil. Now I use light olive oil, not the extra virgin cold pressed, but you can also use any flavorless vegetable oil that you like, that you have on hand. Combine that with the sugar, 4 eggs, vanilla extract, and a half a cup of milk, and whisk it all together until everything is combined and smooth. Once you're done whisking, it should just take about a minute or 2. The sugar should be dissolved inside the mixture. Now it's time to chop up the apples. So now I'm using Fuji apples. You can use Honeycrisp, Fuji, whatever your favorite apples are. Just make sure you're not using Red Delicious because those tend to melt and you're gonna have something like applesauce in the cake, and that's not what you're looking for in this recipe. Granny Smith apples, which are the green ones, are gonna be a little bit tart, so it's up to you. Whatever you prefer, go ahead and use that. But peel the apples and then you're gonna chop them into small pieces. You wanna chop them as small as possible so that way they bake evenly. The exact measurement is gonna be written in the recipe on the website. Now I'm using 2 apples because I like lots of apples, and I'm only gonna use half of the batter for 1 loaf. So if you're gonna do both of the loaves with the apples, then you can use either 2 or 3 apples. It just depends on how appley you like your cakes. Put them in a bowl, sprinkle them with some brown sugar and a nice dusting of cinnamon, and give it a nice mix and set them aside. Now it's time to combine our dry ingredients. For our dry ingredients, we have flour, some baking powder, baking soda, salt, cinnamon, and ground cloves. Just mix that all together and then sift it into the wet ingredients and just gently whisk it all together just until the flour is incorporated. Once you don't see the flour anymore, stop whisking. You want to stop whisking once all of the flour is incorporated. Then go ahead and add your raisins and your chopped walnuts. Now I'm using walnuts, but you can definitely use pecans. And I'm also using raisins because my husband just loves cakes, these types of cakes loaded with raisins. So I go heavy on the raisins. You can put less if you like or completely leave them out. Or you could even substitute them for dried cranberries or whatever your favorite dried fruit is. Apricot works great in this recipe, as does dried cherries. Totally up to you. Just fold them in. At this point, if you're making this all into an apple loaf cake, then go ahead and add the diced apples into the cake. But just sprinkle about 1 to 2 tablespoons of flour onto the diced apples and mix them all together before adding them to your batter. That's going to keep them from sinking to the bottom of the cake, and they'll be nice and dispersed inside your cake when you go to slice it. If you're going to make 1 spice cake and 1 spice loaf, at this time you're going to want to take half of the batter and transfer it into one of the loaf pans. Once you transfer it, then go ahead and fold in the apples into the remaining butter and transfer it into the next loaf pan. And now it's time to garnish it with the apples. Now it's time to make the topping. So you're just going to take an apple and cut all around the core and slice it into thin half moons. So take those apple slices and put them on top of the cake, put them on top of both cakes actually. Brush them with some melted butter and sprinkle with some granulated sugar. Now it's time to bake the cake. So you want your oven to be preheated to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. bake the cakes in the center rack for about 45 minutes to an hour. So I'll show you what they look like as soon as they come out. So both of the apple spice cakes, the cake and the loaf, are ready. The loaf with the apples that are inside of the batter took much longer to cook. It took about an hour. I think it took about an hour and 5 or 10 minutes. It is going to take longer because there are so many apples in it, and you're just going to want to bake it until it's fully cooked. The other one, which is the spice cake that does not have the apples in it, it just has the apples on top, was ready in 45 minutes. You'll know they're ready when you insert a toothpick inside the center and it comes out clean or with some crumbs attached to it. If you see batter, you're going to want to bake it until you do not see batter anymore, because if you see batter on the toothpick, that means the cake still needs some time to cook. Make sure you cook it properly. So once they come out of the oven, let them cool for about 10-15 minutes in their loaf pan. Then go ahead and just lift them out with the paper that's in there. The parchment paper is going to help you lift them out easily. Run the knife around it too, so that way it detaches if it is a little bit stuck here and there. Take it out and then set it on a serving tray and let it cool completely. And then you can also dust some powdered sugar on top. It's also known as confectioner sugar in other parts of the world. Just dust it on top for an extra kiss of sweetness. One last thing that I wanted to mention that's super important. I added my raisins and my walnuts to the batter without adding some flour to them, and the raisins did sink to the bottom of the spice cake because it was a lighter batter. Once you put the apples into it, it kind of holds the raisins up. Make sure you add about a tablespoon of all-purpose flour to your nut and raisin mixture, so that way they don't sink to the bottom. I mean, it's not that big of a deal, but they do kind of tend to burn when they're all the way at the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and take a bite. I'm going to take a bite of the spice cake first, which is the one that does not have the apples inside of the cake. It just has them on top. Very good. You get that crunch from the walnuts. The apple is perfectly cooked on top. It's nice and light and has all the flavors of fall. Now I'm going to go ahead and take a taste of the loaf, the one that has the apples baked inside and over the top. This is the winner, you guys. It tastes like there's apple pie in this cake. I kid you not. You're going to definitely want to make this. The apples are perfectly cooked on the inside. I love the little chewiness from the raisins, the crunch from the walnuts. The spices just scream fall and Thanksgiving. The apple that's on top, that's like more of a garnish, has a complete different texture from the inside, the apple that's inside. It's almost like a dehydrated apple. So good. You guys are definitely going to want to make this. The recipe is on the website. You can go ahead and print it out, www.dimitrasdishes.com. This is Thanksgiving table worthy, you guys. You're going to want to save this one. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. I will see you all next time. Yes, us.